It's a historic verdict. It's never been seen before. But what are going to be the implications? Especially this is the election year in the US as well. Raisha is going to break it all down for you. Over to you, Raisha.
Right, Shivan, a defining moment has been made in American politics. Never before has a former president and a convicted felon been one and the same. Now that the verdict is out, let me tell you what will happen to Trump and what are some of the key issues to consider. The big question being, what happens now? What happens next? Well, he can still leave the court as a free man until Justice Juan Merchan starts the sentencing hearing on July 11th. Let's tell you the factors that are into consideration. Number one is Trump's age. Right now, he's 77 years old. Apart from that, lack of previous convictions, if any, and his violations of the court's gag order. Well, the Trump's team can also appeal against any guilty verdict. However, that can take months and even longer. Well, Trump's team would then face the Court of Appeals. Let's now tell you about the grounds for appeal. Now, the evidence of adult movie star Stormy Daniels, whose alleged sexual encounter with Trump is at the heart of the case, could be one reason. Trump's defense could argue that there are lack of details that have been provided by Stormy Daniels, which could be a ground for appeal. Number two, prosecutors have alleged that violations of federal and state election laws apply to this case, but they have not specified to the jury exactly which law was broken. So no information about which federal or state law has been specified. Meanwhile, legal experts say that there are questions around the scope and application of federal law that could also form a basis for appeal. Another question in everybody's mind right now is, can the former U.S. President Donald Trump be imprisoned? Well, the former U.S. President can serve behind bars. There's also a high possibility that Justice Merchan could choose a lenient punishment, keeping in mind Trump's age and lack of previous convictions. It is also possible that the judge would weigh the unprecedented nature of the case and perhaps avoid putting the former U.S. president behind bars. Well, for more on this historic verdict, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Take a look.
A New York jury has found former President Donald Trump guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records to conceal a hush money payment to a porn star. This is the first time a former U.S. president has been convicted of a crime. Trump's sentencing is scheduled for July 11th, just days before the Republican National Convention, where he is likely to be declared the official Republican nominee. He faces up to 4 years in prison for each count, as well as restitution. However, experts believe that it's very unlikely that there will be a jail sentence. However, house arrest or probation is still likely. Now, the Trump team will likely appeal this verdict, but the process will take months, if not years. It will at least give the former president time to campaign. Despite the conviction, Donald Trump is still eligible to run for president come November. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
All right, we're now being joined by Professor Mark Merowitz, who teaches at State University of New York Maritime College. Mark, welcome to WION World is One. Welcome to World DNA. Always a pleasure having you here on the show with us. Talk to us about the legal ramifications of this historic verdict. What does it mean for Trump now?
I'm also a lawyer, so I can add a little bit of gloss to this, I think. I think you gave a very good overview, and Susan's overview was very good. Let me add a few points. First of all, interesting fact of history, in the 1920 presidential election, Eugene V. Debs, who was the Democratic Socialist candidate for president, actually ran for president while in prison and got 1 million votes. He actually went to prison for urging American young men not to fight in World War I. Nothing to do with this kind of a case. But I don't think we're going to get to that point. Let's just talk about the case itself. First of all, the 34 counts that you spoke about, that is built on a fairly tenuous foundation. Why? Because it's 34 counts of falsifying business records which have been elevated. These are misdemeanors. These are not felonies, higher crimes. But to make it a higher crime, the New York District Attorney has elevated it by connecting that misdemeanor, a lower level crime, to the felony of tax violation, election fraud. Now, the problem is, if you take the time, which I have, to read the indictment, they really don't explain in there what the second crime is. What is the higher crime which elevates this to a serious criminal felony? And the jury didn't specify this either. By the way, about the jury, you mentioned that it took them about 2 days to decide, but that's interesting because the judge's instructions in our system, the jury is the trier of the fact. The judge instructs the jury on the law. The judge's instructions in this case was 55 pages long, and the jury was not given those 55 pages. Indeed, the jury sent the question to the judge and said, I need you to read back some of this. It's so complicated.
Yes.
So I find that quite amazing and perplexing that they were able to reach a verdict on this incredibly complicated case, which many legal experts still cannot figure out what was Trump specifically accused of. Tax fraud, election fraud. So there is, and even your overview indicates the high, incredible complexity and many issues in this case. That's why I think the appeal will probably be successful either to the New York Court of Appeal, the New York State courts,
yes,
or maybe even to the Supreme Court.
Right, right. Mark, U.S. is 6 months away from presidential elections. You clearly listed out the various grounds of appeal for Trump's team. But just after the verdict was announced, Trump's donation site crashed. Talk to us about how Trump's conviction can impact the upcoming elections, and can it change voters' minds?
Well, the polls that came out straight away after this indicated that about 70% of voters are not swayed one way or the other, and small numbers of voters will be swayed. But look at the timing of it, which I think is very important and would also impact how voters look at this. As you mentioned, the sentencing is scheduled for July 11th. The debate is June 27th, and the Republican National Convention, in which Trump is a presumptive nominee, is July 15th. Isn't that a bizarre calendar for an American system of politics? Also, in terms of voters and campaigning, will Trump be able to campaign? Now he's a convicted felon. So is he going to be allowed to campaign? Is he going to be restricted by the court? I mean, what we're finding here is something we have really never seen before. As you said, the conviction of a president, right? And a president now who is campaigning for office. That raises all kinds of questions, and the many other cases that he's involved in. Now, there was a case involving the attempt in Colorado to kick him off the ballot. That failed because the Supreme Court intervened. The Georgia case involves a district attorney who may have a conflict of interest. The document case in Florida has been postponed. This one now is in complete jeopardy in the sense that it may go the appeal route. As you pointed out, that could take a long time. But from the voters' point of view, and that's your question, they see in the news that Trump is a convicted felon. I don't think that will affect the base of the Republican Party. It might, as you said, the donation website crashed. It might even improve Trump's standing. And Trump has said himself that every time he gets accused or he has a proceeding, his poll numbers go up, and I guess his donations go up.
Right.
So it's very, very, I think, just incredibly wild and crazy situation in American politics.
And as you're saying, this is not the end of his presidential run by any stretch of the imagination. So, of course, there's a lot to see in the next 6 months. It's going to be a lot of action.
Right, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA and sharing your insights with us.